Hello, Hannibal Barca. I want to talk to you about race realism. I was just going through some of your old videos catching up, and it made me go look for a fringe elements video, which I think you had mentioned, but I didn't like go specifically try to find one. I just figured I'd go see what he's up to, and you're responding to. And it was clearly a video that you had been replying to. Don't ask me the specifics of which videos. But I left some comments, and I have an impression. And, with the so-called race realists, to me, this is yet another example of where a relativistic approach, right, is called for. I think a lot of, for example, what you do, is commendable as it is, you're using some classical approaches, which is classical epistemology, pragmatized with empiricism, if you forgive my simply condensing that into such a phrase, okay? And this achieves a kind of a relativistic result, but it's sort of like achieving ellipses with circles and circles, with epicycles, right? It works because with the law of approximation, you can usually, if you have infinite number of terms, you can, well, I don't want to go into that stuff, but the Maclaurin series and a Fourier spectrum, you can decompose signals, right, into arbitrary systems, but there's Occam's razor for choosing which ones. The issue in biology is that clearly the classical logical idea of a natural kind, which is abstracted clearly again historically from species, doesn't actually apply to species. Our idea of a category and what belongs in a category is very much related to, a dog is a dog, it begets a dog, and so on. That's a big part. It's a big part of our containment metaphor of what an essential containment is. An abstract container. It's like, it doesn't matter where you go in the world, you can't get out of this cage, you're a dog. But, our study of actual biology has shown that, well, no, there's dogs and coyotes and dingoes, and they can interrelate and can interrelate. You have horses and donkeys, and they can relate, but then there's offspring can't produce, and you have elements that show that you cannot decompose these groups for practical purposes into these non-relativistic categories. Okay. So, for example, bringing it back into something like race realism, they want to argue about what race is, or this stuff is, and a thing with its properties of intelligence or not. Okay. What is intelligence and what is race and all these? These will go around in a circle eventually because they are is questions, right? But if you were to say, what is the average intelligence of this group? That's one thing. But if you were to ask, well, how should I relate? Should I relate if I run into an African American? Should I relate to them as if it's probably likely that I'm more intelligent than them? If you're right in the middle of both curves, then it's pretty close to 50-50 who's more intelligent. But since we're all somewhere on the curve, if an African American comes up to me, if they're likely to be more intelligent than me or not, depends where I am on my curve. And it depends, and it's pretty similar again. It's going to be driven where I am on my curve. If I'm stupid, then African American or not, the other person's likely to be smarter than me. Okay. So I look at this through a lot of different angles, of course, but I want to present this one. Now, let's say Fringe Elements was arguing a few things. That IQ is heritable, right? That IQ correlates to a valuable survival skill, that there's material correlates to having a high IQ. But this part where he argues that one group, as he points out, kind of arbitrarily chosen, has a slightly higher IQ. What's that all about? How does that fit in? Because the way I see it is, if He's saying that IQ is inheritable. It's a kind of natalism. It's further than natalism. It's saying you should only procreate or do business with or anything really with your own kind. That's the point of getting all together, so that you really would just be in an environment where you wouldn't have to try to do that. You wouldn't have to segregate. It's just that's who's around. But certainly making this genetic argument says we're going to procreate with this group and get its heritable statistics. But why would I group myself with people of the same skin tone and forehead shape when I don't care about that? If I really care about IQ and I'm selecting for IQ, I won't get a group that just has the most bare, even if it is granted, correlation with that. Something that still leaves me 50-50 chances of being smarter or stupider than someone else in the same, region of their intelligence bell curve for whatever the arbitrary subgroup is. Why would I choose for forehead shape when I don't care about that? I just care about the brain. Obviously, those arguments would be IQ nationalism, that people should segregate by IQ. So Fringe Elements' response to this kind of point is, some people do believe that, but I'm just arguing that the income disparity is totally fair because of blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right. Two people in the, top 10 percentile or bottom 10 percentile or 50 percentile in either or any race are going to be close enough that IQ difference is not the determinant factor of whether they can do a particular job. It's going to rely on their interpersonal skills and the luck of their background in terms of what they chose or were fortunate enough to get educated in. Somebody of 97 IQ and somebody of 90, whatever, 4 IQ are not going to be that noticeably different in a particular position. So if IQ is heritable, I should select for IQ. Their argument argues for race mixing based on intelligence. So the fact that they try to skirt around that should be very revealing of nothing, because as if it wasn't already revealed. But I think a lot of the circles that we go in logically with these kinds of arguments and how perennial they're allowed to be has to do with, the Clintonian, the meaning of is. Turns out to be important. What the meaning of is, what the alternate approaches to material analysis are, separate from always trying to find what something is. And if you take a relational approach, you'll find that there are things that are tangible. There are, islands in the ocean that can be gripped onto, right? And because these relationships can be characterized. It's very clear, no, you should not treat somebody of another race as though they're probably less intelligent than you when there's millions of people, and the roll of the die is very little influenced by a couple percentage points of difference, even 5. The overall statistics when you have this number of people, it's much more where you happen to be and what, the reasons you're there, and these kinds of things are going to influence much more. So, an emotional force is revealed, whatever you end up discovering it to be about. But anyway, I just thought I'd send that to you instead of just make a point about it, because I think the point is kind of obvious. And it's sort of like, seriously, I know it'll sound disingenuous, but no offense to any of the market anarchists or people that are, if they're nonviolent, speculating anything even in these, dangerous areas because of their association with violence or whatever, or bigotries. Seriously, no offense. But talking with people like that from the point of view of somebody that has a pretty well-centered and founded and robust contrary mode of analysis and way of deconstructing, that's field work, right, Hannibal? That's field work. If we want to make something of that data, we're going to have to be brave enough to then talk about what we found between ourselves And I say brave because it should go on publicly. And yet you end up talking about people in the third person, which is a traditionally non-social thing to do. But this isn't social time. This isn't social hour. This is analysis hour. And it's entirely appropriate that we should analyze these other views. And I think we'll find, if we do, my theory, my proposition, something you and I might materially disagree about or have some sort of a debate over, because it is offered as a prediction, is that we'll find we can never stop the circles that we go around with them. They will go on for years and centuries, with objective epistemology. Even granting that you can think of things like, well, it's really this way with empiricism, but you could talk about it this other way. No, you can't. You have to talk about the relationships. Every statement of every characterization has to involve at least two things, so there can be a relationship, and it's the relationship that you characterize. And this is not a poetic thing. This is like if I was telling you how to program in a C language, I would tell you, here's how you do it. Here's what it looks like. Don't forget the semicolon. That's what I'm telling you. Seriously, I believe you can look at relationships, and when you do that, you can make concrete statements. They don't feel concrete classically because it's supposed to be about things, but scientifically and empirically it matches up very well. And I think if you also make a survey of the things you believe most like strongly and you're most sure about, if you look at what those really are, they'll be characterizations of relationships. So anyway, be that as it may, a separate issue related to the mode of analysis here. But obviously separate from this idea that really what we've been told by fringe elements argues that we should mix races, specifically based on IQ selections.